Hello and welcome to another video. Today we're going to be continuing on with the TypeScript line 75 and we're going to be working on merge intervals. So in this you're given an array of intervals where each interval has a start and an end, and you want to merge all overlapping intervals and return an array of the non-overlapping intervals that can cover all of the intervals in the input. And so let's go through this first example, and this is really the main one we're going to focus on. So when we have some intervals, we need to check which ones are overlapping, right? And which ones are not. So essentially what we need to do is, if you look here, these two are overlapping, and by overlapping, I don't remember exactly if these two values are equal, if that counts as overlapping. I'm not entirely sure. We can check that in the test cases. But definitely when this value is greater than this value, that means these are overlapping. And so the merge procedure is really simple. For two intervals that are overlapping, all you do is you take the starting value from the first one, and then you take the max of these two values here. So these two intervals would be combined into 1, 6. And then you would combine, and then you would just keep going. 8, 10, 15, 18. And that's essentially how you combine them. So it's really straightforward. You just want to take the smallest value on the left and the biggest value on the right. And then that's going to be a combined interval, and you keep doing that, and you keep combining all intervals. So like, let's say these two intervals were combined into 1, 6, but then we had some more intervals that now became overlapping due to this. Like, let's say we had 5, 9 here, and how would you combine these? Same thing, you take the smallest value on the left, so it would be 1, you take the biggest value on the right, and this value can technically be bigger than this value, so it's not always going to be over there, so you have to see which one's bigger, but essentially they would be combined into something like this. So you keep combining, and then the way to, what we're actually going to do is we're just going to have like a current interval. So like, let's say we're over here, we're just going to check, does that current interval need to combine with like the next interval we're looking at? And if it does, we'll combine them and make that the current interval. Otherwise, we'll just push our interval into the array and then take the next interval. So let's go back here just to show you what that would look like. So essentially we can just set a current interval to something like just the first interval, right? So we'll make our current interval 1, 3. We'll have our result array, and then we're just going to loop through the rest of it. So we can just loop through the rest of it. So we'll just say like, okay, does 1, 3 and 2, 6 need to be combined? Yes, it does. So we'll combine both of those, and now our current interval will be 1, 6. And then we look through here and we say, does 1, 6 and 8, 10 need to be combined? No, they don't. So we're going to put 1, 6 into our array. And then our new current interval will be 8, 10. And then, does 8, 10 and 15, 18 need to get combined? No, it doesn't. So we'll put in 8, 10. And then finally, we're going to make 15, 18 our current interval. And at the very end, we will just put in like the interval that we had left into our array. And then we'll get our solution. So that's what we're going to do. That's pretty much it. We're just going to have a current interval, and then we're just going to check, do intervals need to get combined, or can we just put the one we have and then we should return our array? Pretty straightforward algorithm. And we are going to have to sort, because in this example the intervals are sorted, but they're not guaranteed to be sorted. So any interval problem you have, you're definitely going to want to sort your intervals, because it doesn't make sense otherwise, right? You're checking for like overlapping, and they need to be in order. But that's pretty much it. So as long as you know how to combine two intervals, which is literally take the smallest value on the left and the biggest value on the right to combine the two intervals, and that's a combination of two intervals. And you are going to use this for a ton of other interval problems, so this is definitely one that you have to know. Okay, so let's code this up in TypeScript, and once again, we're not going to be using VS Code. It should be pretty straightforward, and I've done enough TypeScript now to where I don't need to see these errors. I can pretty much know what they are. Okay, so let's make a current interval. So we can just say like let cur interval. And then, yeah, so interval's length is guaranteed to be at least 1, so we don't have to worry about like getting an interval that's out of bounds or anything. So we're going to let the current interval equals intervals 0. Then we're just going to loop through the rest of them, and we're also going to have a result array. So we're going to say let result, or it's going to be a const array actually. Const result equals, and then this needs to be a number 2D array like this, so we are going to give it a type, because we're going to set it equal to an empty array at first. So when you set something equal to an empty array, you do want to give it a type, but if you set it something equal to a value, you don't need to give it a type, because it already has a value. So we can't just do something like cur interval, for example. equals 5 or something, right? That would give you an error. And I think it would even give you an error if you did this. Yeah, so it's expecting a number array. Okay. And so, yeah. So essentially the type that you give it, it'll just say like that's the type that needs to be. And if you want it to be something else, then you would specify a type like here, because an empty array can be whatever, like you don't know what you're putting in, so you want to give it a type. Okay. So now we're going to loop through the rest of the intervals, so we can just say let I equals 1, I is less than intervals length plus plus. And then we just have to simply check if there is a intersection, right? If they do like overlap. So we could do that. So we could say if our current interval, and like I said, I'm not sure if like this was 1, 3 and 3, 6, if that counts as overlap. I'm gonna say that's not an overlap, but we might have to change our code later because I don't recall. Like different problems have different criteria for overlapping intervals. Some might say like if 3 and a 3 here is overlapping, some might say it's not. So right now I'm gonna say it's not. Okay, so if cur interval 1 is greater than intervals I, let me check the 0 value, then we are going to just merge those intervals. So we're going to say cur interval equals cur interval. And so if these are sorted, that means this like left value, like if you compare this value and this left value always has to be less than or equal to, so we don't need to see which one's bigger there, but we do need to check the one on the right. So we're going to say cur interval 0 for the first value, and then the second value is going to need to be at math.max. So math.max of cur interval 1 and the actual value here. So intervals I 1. So there we go. So that's the case if they overlap. Otherwise, we are going to push our current interval. So we want to push a copy of it though. We don't want to push the current one because we are going to delete it afterwards. So we can just say res.push cur interval dot slice. We can just make a slice, which will make a copy with no parameters. And then we need to update our cur interval, right? So we can say cur interval equals intervals I. And then finally, we are going to have an interval at the end, so we do need to push it into our result one more time. So we can just do this at the very end of our loop. And now we can simply return the result. And let's see if you have any errors. We definitely might. Okay, let's take a look. So we have 1, 4, 4, 5. So it looks like, yeah, I guess they did show, yeah, so they did show, so 1, 4, and 4, 5 are considered overlapping. So I wasn't sure, but so if they are considered overlapping, it's pretty straightforward. We would just say if cur's interval is less than or greater than or equal to, should do the trick. There we go. Okay, let's see what we have here. Oh, I forgot to sort, right? I said we have to sort. So I actually am curious. Yeah, I think for sort, I think we need to make a custom sort function, actually. So let's do that as well. So intervals.sort, and then it's going to be a function that takes A and B. And then what we want to do is we want to sort them by the first value, right? So we want to say, I believe you need a return. Actually, I'm not sure. Let's test it out. But you might need a return. But anyway, so I think we want A0 minus B0, I think is how you do it. But let's just double check if that's correct. You might need a return, or actually no, you don't need a return because it's the same line, right? So you don't. Okay, so that does work. And the reason you need to sort and you need to give a custom sort is because in TypeScript, sort converts things into a string, so we can try just not giving it anything and see what happens. And we should be getting errors here in some of the test cases, and even in this one here. You can see we are getting, like if we actually print it, they're not going to be sorted correctly. So let's do that. Yeah, so you can see they're not sorted correctly because The way it works is it converts everything into a string. So I think you might even convert the array into a string, and so it's not going to sort correctly. So you do usually during a sort have to give a custom sort. So we're essentially saying let's take A and let's take B, and let's take A0 minus B0, right? Because we want to sort them by the first value. And then if the first values are equal, then we can sort them by the second value. Okay. Yeah, so that's essentially what you do there. And then if you want A to come before B, then you do A minus B. And if you want A to come after B, then you do B minus A. Because if A comes before B, then this should be negative, which makes sense. Or 0, which makes sense, right? So if you have like a 1 and a 2, 1 minus 2 would be negative. And that would make A come before B. Okay, so let's submit that one last time. Okay, there we go. You can see it's pretty efficient. And let's do the time and space complexity. So for the time, we are essentially sorting, which is n log n. And you always have to sort. Pretty much for every intervals problem, you have to sort. So that just is what it is. And then we are just going through our intervals. So that's going to be n time. And we are pushing them to the result, which is also n time. We are slicing, but each interval is only 2. So this is like this costs 2 times. That's totally fine. Slice. And yeah, for the space. So we are sorting, but assuming sort is 0 space, which is, I think it actually does take. I did look into like how sort works in most algorithms. I think they use something like timsort or something, which is not constant space, but it's not n space either. I think it's somewhere in the middle. But I think for most problems, you can just assume sort takes a 1 space. So if that's the case, our interval is only an array of length 2 always. So that's basically constant. And then we don't count the result, so this would be of 1 space. And yeah, it's going to be it for this problem, so hopefully you liked it. And if you did, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps grow it a lot. We're almost at 400 subs, I think. And then we'll be continuing with the Blind 75 tomorrow. So I'll see you in that one. Thanks for watching.